The coastline of Britain is a beautiful, yet deadly place to behold. Many people have met their fate at the mercy of the sea surrounding this island. Majestic cliffs stretch as far as the eye can see. In the summer, the ocean brings a rich abundance of fish, and birds soar freely above the cliff tops. But make no mistake, this is an unforgiving place to be. In this episode, I'm going to show you 10 survival tips that might just help you out if you find yourself in a difficult situation on the coast. Before we dive deep into this video, I'd like to thank the History Channel for sponsoring this episode. The final episode of the epic survival series, Alone, airs Saturday, August 20th at 8 PM Eastern Standard Time. And here is what's in store for the series finale.
We're entering full-blown whiteout conditions right now.
On the season finale of Alone,
I'm just way too cold to spend more time out there.
3 people remain.
I'm worried that it might be frostbite.
Who will last 100 days
It's gonna be deadly cold tonight.
and win the $1 million prize.
We're running out of options here pretty fast.
Don't miss Alone, the $1 Million Challenge. Season finale, Thursday, August 20th at 8, right here on History.
Tired, exhausted, and not knowing when their next meal will be, who will fight the hardest and make it 100 days in the Arctic to win the prize of $1 million? See the link in the description for more information on the show. There are many things that can go wrong on the coast, and most of the time you are likely to have some items on you. But for this video, I'm going to focus on the use of minimal gear or no gear at all. If you find yourself in the sea, you're struggling for breath, and you're out of your depth, then your first priority is to calm yourself down. Focus on your breathing. Take control of each breath. The muscles in your body are naturally heavy and dense. A significant amount of muscle mass is from your waist down, which means that your hips and your legs will naturally want to sink. This will lead you to tread water and begin to burn calories. To help save calories and calm your body down, lean back and spread your arms and legs into a starfish position. Push your hips towards the surface and just float there. The body's natural reaction when being submerged in cold water is to gasp and panic. This is called cold water shock. It should pass in less than a minute, so don't try to swim straight away. If there are any parents watching this video whose children are not experienced at being in the water, then teach them the starfish floating position. It's a vital survival technique, and you can help children learn this by supporting their hips as they lean back. Around half the people who die at the coast slip, fall, or trip into the water. They never intended to get wet. This means that unless you plan to go into the water, the chances are that you will have your clothes on. In the next survival tip, I will show you how to create a makeshift buoyancy aid from your trousers or your t-shirt. If you find yourself in a situation where you might need to cross a small estuary, inlet, or even swim to or from an island, you can use the clothes that you are wearing to make a buoyancy aid to help keep you afloat. Tie a knot at the end of each trouser leg. Make sure the knot is pulled tight. Then, open up the waistband of your trousers, and with a fast downward motion, slam them through the surface of the water to trap air. Quickly cinch up the waistband underwater, and both trouser legs should now be filled with air. You can use these as a support to keep you afloat when swimming. In this example, I did it while standing in the shallows, but you can still do this in open water. Whilst treading water, go through the same steps, but this time slam the trousers down from behind your head. You can apply this same technique with a t-shirt. Tie a knot at the end of each sleeve and open up the waist of the t-shirt and pull it down hard on the surface of the water. The coastline is home to many different species of bird. Birds are in a constant state of survival. They are always on the lookout for their next meal. If you watch them closely, you will be able to monitor their feeding habits, and in turn you should be able to locate pockets of fish that the birds are feeding on. Look for short, sharp, diving movements, and large flocks of birds, like seagulls, Often it means there are fish below. This particular bird is called a cormorant. It's a voracious feeder, and you can often see them on the surface of the sea with a fish in their mouth. In fact, in Japan, commercial fishermen tie a leash to these birds and let them dive to catch the fish for them. If you have no means of catching a fish, there are other ways to procure your food. When the tide is out, you will generally see rocks and seaweed exposed. Use this time wisely to forage and gather various shellfish and crustaceans. In Britain's coastline, one of the more common wild edibles you can find is the periwinkle. The periwinkle is a species of sea snail or whelk. It is a marine gastropod mollusk. Marine mollusks are rich in omega-3 fatty acids and protein. Periwinkles are easy to collect and cook. I like to boil them for 10 to 15 minutes. They can be fiddly to eat, but they have a great taste to them. Another edible mollusk that is often found on rocks nearby to periwinkles is the limpet. Limpets have a greyish white shell that is conical in shape. Underneath, they have a muscular foot which attaches to the rock and enables the limpet to move around. Limpets are not as easy to collect as periwinkles. As soon as they feel any vibration or movement on the rock, they will clamp down hard and will be almost impossible to get off by hand. So the key is silent attack. Use a small rock and with a swift, sideways swing, knock the limpet off the rock. When turned upside down, you can see the yellow, muscular foot. This is the edible part. Be aware, limpets are prone to local population collapses if you overharvest them, so don't take all of your limpets from one rock. There are a number of ways to cook limpets. You can either boil them or roast them in their own shell. Again, I tend to boil them for around 10 to 15 minutes. They are tough and rubbery, but they still taste good. When boiled, the muscular foot is removed from the shell and you can see the black sac on top, which contains its guts. You can eat these guts, but I prefer to remove them before eating it. Here you can see indentations where the limpets have sucked onto the rock. Whilst sea snails and mollusks are usually easy to find, often the more tasty food is harder to catch. If you lift larger rocks and boulders that have seaweed on them, you will often find crabs underneath. But you have to be fast, as the crabs will quickly bolt to find shelter once they see you. Here is a tiny, common shore crab, much too small to eat. To handle crabs, come in from behind them and push their shell down so that they don't run away. If you hold them from the back of their shell, they will struggle to pinch you from there. When moving and lifting rocks to collect crabs, be sure to return the rock to its original position to ensure a safe haven for future crabs to hide in. This particular crevice is an ideal hideout for a lobster, but sadly there was no luck with this one. Foraging for mollusks, snails and crustaceans can be labour intensive and may offer little reward. In a survival situation, you may find yourself low on energy and needing nutrients fast. One of the first options for food is seaweed, and there are a number of edible seaweed options for you. This seaweed here is a form of rack, bladder rack to be specific. This bladder rack is edible. The young tips of the seaweed are generally quite tender, and you can either eat it raw or boil it. Bladder rack is high in iodine, fibre, vitamins and minerals. This small green seaweed is called sea lettuce. It is commonly found in rock pool edges, and it tends to start out a pale green when young, and then turns a more vibrant green as it matures. This seaweed is very high in protein. There is no need to cook this one. You can eat it raw or dry it out and eat it like crisps. This bright green mass is called gutweed. It is very common on rocks that are high on the shoreline, and it can even survive in the splash zone. You can eat it raw, but the taste is not as good as sea lettuce. If you are able to, fry it over a fire to get the best flavour. This Medusa looking plant is a snake-lock anemone. It is green in colour and has purple tips, which are a result of a green fluorescent protein. It is edible, however, it has hardly any calories and it's low in fat. Not really something you want when you're trying to survive, but it is high in protein. Beware, the tentacles on this anemone do sting. In regions of Spain, it is bathed in vinegar and then fried to reduce the sting. Personally, I wouldn't eat this plant. They are already under pressure as it is, and there is an abundance of other edible seaweeds nearby. One of the greatest methods of coastal survival is having knowledge of the tides. In each 24-hour period, the tide will go out and come back in, twice. Sometimes the tide will come in and go out much more than normal. Every time there is a full moon or a new moon, the tide will go out and come in much further than usual. This is known as a spring tide. On the weeks in between, when it is a half moon, the tide will not go in or come out as far. This is known as a neap tide. An incoming tide is also known as a flood tide, and an outgoing tide is known as the ebb tide. You will also get no movement in the tide for 1 hour either side of high or low tide. This is known as the slack tide. To know when the tide is coming in or out, or how far the tide might come in, is a key survival skill to have. You can generally tell how far the tide might come in by looking at the shoreline. For example, in this shot here, you can see I am walking on rocks that are wet. They have seaweed on them, which is also wet. This tells me that it's likely the tide is still going out, as the sun would have dried the seaweed more if the tide was only just coming in. Where I am now standing, you can clearly see where the rocks go from wet to dry. This marks where the tide comes up to when it is high tide. However, if I walk further up the beach, you will notice a line of dry seaweed. This is likely where the tide will come to during a big spring tide. So by looking at this tidal situation, I know that if I carried on walking around the headland in the distance on a big spring tide, there is a strong chance that I might get cut off and stranded due to the high spring tide. It's not all doom and gloom though. Often, the spring high tide mark can offer many rewards. You will generally find dry driftwood, which would help when lighting a fire. If you take a wander along these high tide marks, you will often find remnants of our wasteful society. Things like this plastic bottle I could use as a container for carrying limpets and periwinkles. Even something like this plastic pen could come in useful. As I walked further along, I noticed some fine strands of fishing line, which I could use in the future. On my final find was this Doritos crisp packet. Chili heatwave, my favourite. Now this might seem like rubbish and junk washed up on the beach, and that's because it is. But with these items, you can make something useful that might save your life. The inside of most crisp packets is made of reflective material. If you carefully tear down the edge of the crisp packet, you actually get quite a lot of this reflective material. Using the pen I found, I carefully punched 4 holes in each corner of the packet. Then I unravelled as much fishing line as I could and tied each corner of the crisp packet to a piece of driftwood that I found on the beach. I snapped off the protruding branch of driftwood, and now I have a signalling mirror which can be used to signal any planes or boats for rescue. If I needed to carry it with me, I can simply roll it up and store it in my pockets or backpack ready to be used again. If you find yourself with a fishing rod but you've run out of bait, you can forage for your own from the shore. Remember that limpet we foraged for earlier? You can use your knife to gently prise the muscular foot out of its shell. Then feed this onto your hook, guts and all, and you have yourself a fishing bait. As well as knowing what the tide is doing, it's a good idea to watch the landscape and geology of the area before you set up camp. The British coastline is made up of a mixture of rock type, from sedimentary style cliffs like chalk and sandstone, to harder, more igneous rock such as basalt. Be aware of setting up camp for the night under soft rock cliffs. There could be a chance of a landslide. Take this small cliff here. The rock is soft and falls away easily. It even crumbles in my hands. But here is some evidence that there has been a landslide in the past. This brown spiky looking bush is a gorse bush. It is normally green with small yellow flowers on it, but I can see that the whole root system has been ripped up. As I looked up, I could see the remaining gorse bushes at the top of the cliff. It's also good to be aware of any overhangs. These are not stable, and camping under one is definitely risky. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks also to History Channel for sponsoring this episode. Don't miss the series finale of Alone, Saturday, August 20th at 8 PM. See you in the next episode.
Oh. This one I thought about. This one I thought about. Oh my God. Try to get out of here. Do not, please. Come here. Get out of here. Get out of here. I got my stuff out, most of it, I think. Did I throw the phone out? Here it is. Sounds freaking real. I turned around for 1 second, and when I looked up, the whole freaking shelter is on fire, man. On my feather, got a little char. Then my lungs hurt. Oh my God. I can't believe the timing of it. I guess it was my time to leave. I couldn't drag the cases out, so the batteries are blowing up.